watching India Sense, your one-stop place to get all news that matter to the global Indian for India's rise. I'm Gaurie Dwivedi. A quick check of the stories we're tracking for you this week.
Cancel the hanging of over 800 people. They were going to hang over 800 people yesterday, and I greatly respect the fact that they canceled.
After weeks of escalating tensions and strike threats, US President Donald Trump seems to have done a big U-turn. Donald Trump thanks Iranian regime for calling off execution of thousands of political prisoners, says it has greatly influenced decision to call off the strikes. India is the world's biggest economic engine, and the IMF acknowledges it. IMF is all set to increase India's 6.6% GDP growth forecast this year to upwards as the third quarter GDP comes up with a 7% plus growth. UK's worst kept secret out yet again. Another minor girl raped by Pakistanis. The grooming gang case is back as many wonder why is Keir Starmer so soft on these rapists and pedophiles. Bangladesh election campaign all set to begin on 22nd of January as interim advisor Mohammad Yunus says that polls will take place on the 12th of February no matter who says what. Pakistan, Saudi Arabia and Turkey discuss the possibility of an Islamic NATO. Saudi Arabia is set to provide money. Pakistanis will bring in the nukes, and Turkey, which is part of the NATO, is set to provide the technological and military-industrial complex details. What should India do? We tell you here. A week seems like a lifetime in Trumpland. In between getting the Nobel Peace Prize winner to dedicate her award to him and getting the road between Palm Beach Airport and Mar-a-Lago named as President Donald J. Trump Boulevard, a lot has actually happened, viewers. And the Trump administration, firstly, is very serious about getting Greenland, saying if not America, then Russia and China will get it. And for that, he's using his favorite threat, tariffs. And all those countries that are opposing Greenland annexation by the US will be slapped with additional tariffs. What the world sees as madness, Trump administration actually sees method. And now Greenland is strategic, viewers. It offers vast deposits of untapped resources, shorter trade routes, and a complete domination of the Arctic. Of course, in true Trump fashion, which authority, which law, which countries, no one knows. But what remains clear is that Trump wants to go ahead. Listen in.
And I may do that for Greenland too. I may put a tariff on countries if they don't go along with Greenland, because we need Greenland for national security. So I may do that. I'll give you a little, I'll take you out of that. In fact, that'll end up being the story. But actually, this is a much bigger story because we're reducing healthcare by numbers that you haven't seen.
Now let's come to Iran. After days of saying the US will exercise military options to end the brutal crackdown on protesters in Iran, the Trump regime says it is now backing off. The administration says for the moment, a military strike is off the table, but not completely. Because the protests have not ended, it's just that the executions have been stayed for now. Now, if you're a MAGA loyalist or a Trump loyalist like his core MAGA base, then you would argue that the president's messages for calm comes just ahead of his attacks, giving the kind of strategic leverage that his administration needs. Just as it happened ahead of Israel's strikes on Iran last year and America's B-2 bomber strikes on Iran. But if you're not a MAGA fan, then we can speak logic. And that is where you ask that why is it that the president has suddenly backed off? Why is he not supporting Raza Pahlavi completely, the son of last Shah of Iran who's living in exile? Well, that's because there are no easy answers in Iran. Trump likes quick wins, easy wins, like the capture of Maduro. US forces went inside and quickly captured the Venezuelan former president. It's not going to be the same in Iran. It may be a long, protracted battle because the Khamenei regime is battle-hardened, indoctrinated, and will go to any length to take on America. And that is something that the Trump administration finally realizes, and that's why you have yet another U-turn by the Trump administration.
Nobody convinced me. I convinced myself. You had yesterday scheduled over 800 hangings. They didn't hang anyone. They canceled the hangings. That had a big impact.
And now that brings me to the India impact of all that happening around the world, this madness, this mayhem. What is happening to India? Well, there's a young Trump loyalist who's taken over as the next ambassador. The priority is to fix the communication gaps, get the trade pact going, address the recent trust deficit that has been aided by Donald Trump's cozy and warm equation with Pakistani Army Chief Asim Munir. Sergio Gaurie on day one declared that there is no partner more important than India. But to turn that vision into reality, Sergio Gaurie needs to deliver quick wins. He needs to do that on trade, he needs to do that on Quad, and he needs to dial down on the rhetoric that has really impacted the relationship in the last 6 months or so. That's the only way that India and US can collectively navigate amidst this mayhem. To discuss how this is likely to pan out, let's get in Peter Vigo, who's a defense analyst joining us from Denmark. He's a defense analyst with the Royal Danish Defense College. Thanks much, Peter, for speaking to us. We here in India are wondering exactly what is happening in Greenland. We are seeing the headlines every day, news of when, if, and how soon Donald Trump is actually going to invade Greenland. What are your thoughts?
Well, you started out by pointing out that Trump is now threatening to put tariffs on the countries that are now sending a small contingent of soldiers to Greenland in an attempt to signal to the United States that it would be a very bad idea to attack Greenland. So in a sense, that's a positive thing, that he's moved away from threatening to use force, and now he's threatening tariffs instead. That may be problematic for Trump, because if he imposes tariffs on an EU country, then the EU as a united actor is obliged to retaliate by putting tariffs on the United States. So basically he's now, warming up to a trade war with the entire EU.
Now that's significant. A trade war with the EU is likely. We in India are already facing additional tariffs. We have been singled out for no reason whatsoever. We have a new ambassador here, and there's a lot of expectation that the India-US relationship will probably recover. But I want to understand from you, in this madness, do you see any method, or are you also bracing for what's going to happen next because there's complete unpredictability?
Well, yes, it is certainly not easy to predict what Trump will be doing next. But on the other hand, as you also pointed out in your analysis of the reason why Trump has now backed away from attacking Iran, he's usually in it for quick wins. And when he encounters stiff opposition and something that might impose significant costs on the United States, he has a tendency and a history of backing down. So we are sort of hoping that that will happen over Greenland too, because what we are now seeing is a more or less united European response to
very interesting what you said. You expect Donald Trump to back down when he's talking to his MAGA base and saying Greenland has to come anyway, either diplomatically or by force?
He has backed down on a number of occasions already, and you see that with the Ukraine. He has again and again told the EU and also Ukraine to accept a Russian-imposed peace. Mm-hmm. And each time the Europe and Ukraine has come together and said no, and then they have offered a counter peace proposal, which Trump then immediately has accepted, even though he knows that that's completely unacceptable to Russia, and that's why his peace efforts in the Russian-Ukraine war is going nowhere. And so therefore it's not unthinkable that he might adopt the same situation here.
You've raised a very important point that, there have been U-turns. We ourselves, I just told our viewers as well on what happened in Iran. So there have been multiple U-turns. Who knows what Donald Trump will do going forward. But don't forget, he's only going to be celebrating his first year in office. He has 3 more years left. He has a lot of this unfinished agenda. And there is a sense that he has to work and continue to appeal to his core MAGA base. So he cannot back down till he achieves some of these objectives.
No, but sometimes he just declares victory and moves on, even though everybody else can see that's not a victory. I mean, he is already... Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you look at his new national security strategy, he says he has stopped war in 8 places, and quite a few of these places war continues. He also says that he has ended the Iranian nuclear program, which is by all that we can tell, clearly not the case. So it may be possible to devise a compromise that he can call a win and then move on. Because the great thing about Greenland is that the United States already has military control over Greenland. There are no Russian ships. There are no Chinese ships. So he can easily, at some point declare victory and move on. And that's, of course, what we are hoping for in Europe.
Mm-hmm. So what will be his version of victory is what I'm going to ask you, Peter. But very quickly, what do you think will be Donald Trump's way to get out of this by declaring to his core constituency that he came out as a winner? America came out as a winner.
Well, if he ends up negotiating a mineral deal with the Greenlandic government in the same way that he negotiated a mineral deal with the Ukrainian government, he could call that a victory. And if NATO puts in more troops in Greenland or conducts more exercises, he can also call that a win, because he can say that he has pressed his European partners to carry the burden instead of the US, and therefore that's a fantastic deal for the United States.
All right, I'm going to leave it there. Peter Vico joining us live from Copenhagen, viewers, and that's really what it comes down to, whether there is method to this, whether there is complete madness, and is it now leading to mayhem across the world, is what Trump administration's recent moves make us wonder. Moving on, viewers. America is on edge. A US citizen was killed during an ICE raid that has triggered protests and demands for accountability. But as outrage grows over the use of force, a new controversy is actually fueling fire. This time over words, a slogan that appeared at Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem's podium that is now drawing fierce backlash. The language that is being used, which is of collective punishment and authoritarian power, and reminding many of the phrases used during Nazi Germany. Take a look.
Shame! This guy has a gun. They're firing guns.
America is once again on edge. The fatal shooting of US citizen Rennie Good during an ICE raid has sparked protests across the country.
Who keeps us safe? We keep us safe. Unity looks like. This is what unity looks like.
With demonstrators demanding accountability, restraint, and answers. But as outrage grows over the use of force, a different controversy is now consuming Washington. One about language, symbolism, and power. At the center of it is US Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, not just for immigration enforcement, but for what appeared on her own podium. One of ours, all of yours. A phrase displayed during a Homeland Security briefing and now making national headlines. What might have passed as a slogan has instead ignited a firestorm. With critics warning, it echoes the logic of Nazi-era collective punishment. The idea that harm to one justifies retaliation against many. Historians and fact-checkers argue that there is no documented evidence that this exact phrase was an official Nazi slogan. But critics argue that the concern is about what it signals. The symbolism becomes harder to dismiss when placed in context. Adolf Hitler's regime infamously promoted its rule with the slogan, "One people, one realm, one leader." And just 3 days after Rennie Good's killing, the US Department of Labor shared a post, "One homeland, one people, one heritage," drawing fresh controversy. Instead of de-escalation, instead of accountability, the administration chose language that mirrors some of history's most dangerous political messaging. Homeland Security has brushed off the backlash, calling the Nazi comparisons exaggerated and politically motivated. Secretary Noem has offered no apology. The political fallout is escalating. More than 70 House Democrats have introduced impeachment motions against Kristi Noem, accusing her of abuse of power and promoting inflammatory rhetoric.
Is using every single tool
This controversy cuts deeper than a slogan on a podium. When the state speaks in terms of collective blame than individual rights, history tells us what happens next. And right now, the signals coming from Washington is one many Americans find deeply unsettling.
Moving on to Pakistan, which has, viewers, only one utility, a utility that it manages to extract maximum leverage out of. Pakistan is the only Muslim nation that has nuclear weapons. And after Saudi Arabia, it is now Turkey that is courting Islamabad. Now, Turkey is a NATO member. It has allowed it to develop the largest military setup, military-industrial complex in the entire Muslim world. And it knows how an operation like the NATO works. And given the historic closeness of Turkey and Pakistan, their partnership in Operation Sindoor, where Turkish drones were used by Pakistan, means that if two of them actually come together, along with Saudi Arabia, there will be long-term impact on India. And that may be significant. Now, the proposed Islamic NATO is an attempt to create some sort of a collective security bloc, just like NATO, where there's an Article 5 which says that attack on one is an attack on all. And something similar is what Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Pakistan are attempting to do. But let's ask this question. If there is an attack, in theory, if there is another Operation Sindoor, will Turkey and Saudi Arabia formally come to protect Pakistan? Will Saudi Arabia do so? Of course not. Because unlike Pakistan, Saudi Arabia is not a failed state and will not risk a large multicultural economic strategic ties with India. But what it does is, it provides Pakistan global legitimacy. An Islamic NATO, formal or informal, gives Pakistan what it has always sought: international backing, military cover, and escalation leverage against India. And all of this matters right now. Operation Sindoor, viewers, hasn't ended. This also needs to be seen in times of immense global volatility that is coming in from Washington. We here ourselves are talking about the madness, the mayhem that's coming in from the Trump administration. And that uncertainty is making nations in the Middle East seek options. As far as India is concerned, there is only one option: double down on your military preparedness. That's the single and the only option that India has in the wake of all such possibilities that Pakistan is exploring. UK's worst kept secret. It has exploded back in public view. The Pakistani grooming gangs. Pakistani men raping and molesting minor girls. These are Christians, Hindus, Sikhs. This has been going on for over a decade and a half. The latest is a 16-year-old girl held captive and raped. Police once again accused of inaction. Hundreds from the Sikh community finally poured on the streets, even as many are asking, why is the Starmer government not acting? Why is it sympathetic to these Pakistani men who are preying on minor non-Muslim girls? Why is this now the biggest political issue that is likely to lead to major social change in UK going forward? This report tells you.
Police are turning a blind eye to this. The parents have gone to the police many, many times and nothing is being done.
It doesn't come back. That's right. Right?
Yes. Every time. No pedophiles.
Anger spilling onto Britain's streets. A teenager held captive, hundreds of Sikhs on the UK streets, and a dramatic rescue. Putting the spotlight on an issue UK PM Keir Starmer hoped to cover up: the rampant menace of Pakistani grooming gangs.
We're not here to cause a problem here, we just want a word from you. Open the door, mate.
Over 200 members of the Sikh community took to the streets of West London to rescue a 16-year-old girl allegedly being held captive by a Pakistani grooming gang and raped by half a dozen men. Viral footage shows protesters chanting, "Jo bole so nihal, Sat Sri Akal." a cry of defiance against police inaction. Ultimately, the police arrested one of the suspects after hours of protests.
She will not come back! We are Sikhs and we're standing together!
For critics, the message is damning. When the state hesitates, communities are left to protect their own. The incident has renewed fury over UK's grooming gang scandal. Pakistani grooming gangs in the UK have been long associated with systematic child sexual abuse for decades, targeting young interfaith girls from vulnerable backgrounds to isolate them from their families. Victims were often ignored or silenced, while authorities looked the other way, fearful of a political fallout and accusations of racism.
We want to know why that girl at the age of 14 was groomed.
Though the government announced a national inquiry last year, progress has stalled. The row turned political last year, with billionaire Elon Musk and far-right Reform UK leader Nigel Farage calling out Starmer's inaction for being complicit in what they call the rape of Britain. The West London rescue is no longer just about one girl. It's an indictment of a system that failed to act, a government accused of prioritizing optics over victims, and a society now asking how many more warnings will be ignored. As public anger grows, one question looms large. How many more children must be failed before the UK finally confronts this crisis head on?
I've just spoken to 4 or 5 neighbours in there.
There is a reason why 2 important political developments are reshaping the UK, viewers. The far-right Nigel Farage's party is now gaining massive traction amongst white Christians. And the Starmer government is often referred to as Gestapo Starmer because of the one-sided norms that have been put in place on social media that many whites feel do not allow them to make innocuous posts without being locked up, even as the other side is able to get away with something like rape. And this is not what multiculturalism looks like. This is how the left plus extremist alliance looks like. And that's why many are asking, why is Keir Starmer silent, even as communities are erupting in anger and victims are demanding justice? Nigel Farage, for one, is watching this very closely, and that will reshape UK in the next couple of years. In World View this week, in 5 days, Bangladesh election campaign will kickstart amidst massive and unprecedented security. The implications come at a time, and the elections actually are happening at a time of continued attacks on minority Hindus who have been lynched, burnt alive, their women and children have been targeted. Even though the Yunus government has not said a single word of assurance for 9% of Bangladesh's population. The elections also come at a time when one of its main political parties, the Awami League, has been banned, and the Jamaat-e-Islami has been mainstreamed, which will be putting its candidates in the upcoming elections. India, for one, is hoping that the elections will pave the way for a democratically elected and stable government that will last 5 years. No matter how imperfect the elections are, they are still better than the continued reign of the interim advisor, Mohammad Yunus. All right, on that note, we wrap things up on this edition of India Sense. Thanks so much for watching.